The story I'm about to read is called 18 Fatalities. It's a very sensitive story about railroad fatalities. So it has a few details that are not pretty. So if you're offended by that sort of topic or situations, please don't watch this video. 18 Fatalities. The last day I worked on the railroad, my Amtrak train, while traveling at 50 miles an hour, struck a man walking near the tracks just south of milepost 68 in Mount Vernon, Washington. The locomotive engineer hollered over the radio, "Emergency! Emergency! Emergency!" We just hit someone as the train began sliding to the stop. I was at the conductor's desk in the bistro lounge and made my way 50 feet to the PA. The moment we stopped, I made a quick announcement. If there are any medical professionals on board, please report to an employee. Then I opened the door, hit the ground, and rushed to the scene. When I found him, it was obvious that there was no reason to make an attempt at first aid. The lady medical professional passenger who showed up a minute later agreed. From the previous 17 fatalities I had witnessed, I had learned one thing for positive. We were not going anywhere until the coroner sanctioned it. I asked every policeman, medical person, and railroad official who showed up if they had called the coroner. As we waited for the coroner, my mind raced back, tracking over the previous 40 years of incidents. Fatalities on the railroad happen mostly by trains running over people who are walking on or near the tracks, or while people are driving vehicles over or near railroad tracks, mostly at crossings. Sometimes it's a matter of people not paying attention, and many are impaired from drugs or alcohol. A fair amount of these fatalities are suicides, while some being purely accidental, such as the heartbreaking ones involving children. My first fatality was Thanksgiving Eve in 1978 or 1979. I was a young brakeman on a freight train northbound from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, and as our train came into downtown Puyallup, Washington, a lady who appeared to be crossing the tracks on foot in front of us suddenly lay down across the rails. When the elderly coroner showed up and attempted to go under the train to remove her body, I could see him struggling. I asked him if he would like me to do the deed. He stepped back and I went under the train. I picked up the woman's severed arm and put it in her coat sleeve, then pulled the hood of her coat over her disfigured face. Out from under the train, I lifted her up and carried her to a stretcher, where I lay her down and said a prayer. The second fatality that I was involved with was in 1992 near King Street Station. There was a man that appeared he was going to be crossing the tracks in front of us. At first it appeared to me that he was in a hurry and wanted to cross in front of us, but suddenly he hesitated and seemed as if he changed his mind, realizing that it was not safe to cross. When we were about 200 feet away, the man suddenly bolted into our path. I yanked the emergency brake valve as fast as I could, right as he drove onto the tracks, laying his neck across the east rail in front of us. The wheels locked up and we slid into the man and over him for another 100 feet. I raced down the stairs, jumped off the train, and ran back to the mangled man, but there was nothing I could do. Had I not applied the brakes, it would have been a less horrific scene. Instead of a clean decapitation, he had a mangled, broken neck as the wheels were locked up and sliding on impact. The poor man jerked around in spasms for 2 or 3 minutes before finally succumbing to his wounds. I was the first to the scene of these horrific events too many times. On one incident, the spindly bartender, Lemon Drop Eric, and I rushed out to the scene as I pulled a young man's corpse from a river. On another incident, I gave a young man failed resuscitation attempts while his buddy wailed in the background. I will spare you the details of the other fatalities, but suffice to say that they were not fun. There were many other times the train was fortunately put into emergency braking fast enough to allow the potential victim to escape or only be injured. It is never a fun experience holding injured people's hands until the ambulance arrives. Thousands of times I heard the train's air brakes exhaust into emergency and waited for the locomotive engineer to state the reason. Most commonly they would say we just missed someone. They were called near misses and were much better than the alternative. But going back to my last fatality, the coroner showed up, did the investigation, and released the train. We received all the authorities and permissions required to continue southbound. So we performed a train air brake test and departed. When I put the delay into the delay device, it came up to 1 hour and 9 minutes, which might be some kind of record for delays of that type. Usually there are 3 or 4 hours or more. The Locomotive Engineer Coalition sniffer on the northbound train we were soon passed in the siding told us to get onto the yard channel. When we did, he told us that there was still some DNA on the front of our engine. I had our engineer Trenchcoat Sam stop the train in the wooded area before the Everett station stop. I hopped off with some water bottles to clean up the remaining viscera. I apologized to the deceased with a prayer before continuing into my home terminal, that day being my last day on the railroad.